Right on. So week 10, learn together. So one of the things I know for sure I'm going to add, and most of you probably heard me say this on your Dev 0, was that for Dev 1, when you walk through your code with me, you're going to need to use some type of debugger. Now, many of us, based on the fact that I've seen your setups, most of us are using VS Code. So if you're using something else, you'll just have to figure out what it is you will use for that. So to get you into using this, and actually I have to give John a shout out in this class. He actually, without me prompting him in his Dev 0, actually naturally started the debugger. And I'm telling you, I really believe that learning how to run the debugger and how to walk through your code is one of the best ways to become a better coder. Okay, so that's why I find it really important, and I recommend from here on out, if you're not already doing it, which some of you may be based on your experience. You already have experience with this, but I'm guessing many of you have not. So just know that that is going to be one of the requirements. So having said that, let me just say I have, as of today, updated the dev_1 to include that students need to use debugging tools to walk their code, should be walk me through their code during the code review. And the other one I added, and you won't be surprised by this after last week, is the use of third-party libraries is fine. Just make sure they are not OS specific. Like don't use a Windows only library. That won't work for me. And really in general, you shouldn't. And make sure if you do use a third-party library, you have to use that virtual env setup that I did last week. So I'm going to be working on these as we move forward. As a matter of fact, I don't, as of this point of the recording, because I'm recording in week 8, so I don't have all your feedback about what else you'd want me to put here. I'm thinking more about this, especially now that we've moved to regex. So I'm going to do that as the second part here. But first, what I want you to do for this first part, and you are going to need to write about it, is I want you to pull up your code. Now I'm going to pull up mine. So here's my code for my Dev 0, right? And so one of the things I ask everyone in their code reviews is walk me through the code at the point that you have that it is creating output, or really from its point of execution. Okay, so in this case, and many of you have seen this option when you run your code, because many of you are running it up here, you run it without debugging. So the debugging option was right above it. So in order for you to run debugging, you have to actually set a breakpoint. And basically what you're doing here is you're telling your code, break at this point, stop. Okay, stop. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it on the while, because that's really where I start to interact with the user and I start to execute. So in this case, you can see the red debugger there, or the red point, and it even tells you it's a breakpoint. And there's a couple of ways now to get into the debugging besides the place that you've seen it here. There is also an option over here to the left that just says run. And you could do that as well. So I'll come up here and I'll say start debugging. And it'll ask you the current file, and you say, yep. And so the screen turns a little different on the bottom here. You see it changes colors. Your terminal goes into a debugging console. Your code is paused right here at this point. And so you basically have most of what you're going to be using are these 3 options. So if I want, and most of the time I'm using step into, and basically what that means is run that line, okay? But just know that there's a lot of great information here as we work through here, but I could already just hold my mouse over play game and see that it's true. I can see in my code I've done it, but the editor, in this case, the debugging tools show me that this is true. Okay, so I can just say step into here, which by the way, I'm going to go ahead and click. Yeah, I'm not sure why. Anyway. So it is good to click in here, because the other thing is you get a lot of great information. Okay, you can see where all your, like I can see my global variable is set up here, or I see it, there's nothing in it. I see my gameplay. I see that I imported random, right? So no special variables, I think, as of yet, some built-ins. But again, the more you get used to just the basic functionality, then you can dig a little deeper. So I'm going to go ahead and say, right, and it basically just executes that line. Now, if I didn't want to see that, I could just jump over it, right, and it would just go to the next one. Now, what happens is, and notice here, it's actually stopping because it's asking me for my input. So I'm going to say human play, okay, and then it's executed that. I can see what choice is stored in there, right? I could step completely out. I could step out, which basically is kind of a stop that just stops it. But most of the time, you're either stepping into it, which means show me that step that you're executing, because now it's doing that comparison, and now it's going to actually call, right? So that's the other thing here is your call stack is like, because my user plays got called from my global, right? So that's the first function that got called. I can see that there. Again, I can click in here to see my local, and there's nothing in here yet because I haven't executed anything yet. As soon as I do, though, I see, and again, after you execute each line, you can see the update of your variables. What gets stored in there. And this is just really good information to have. So I'm going to step through, and now it's prompting again for the user input, right? So I'm going to give it my name, and now I'm going to continue playing. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to walk through the code. You walk through it, meaning step into, or step over, meaning just execute it. Okay, and again, watch the variables, see if you've learned something new from watching this, doing this. And I want you to get used to doing this. So every time we do a coding project, a code along, or this learn together, you need to be doing this, because then you get more comfortable with it, so that it prepares you for Dev 1 requirement. But also it just makes it easier for you to find issues in your code. Now, by the way, the very common way, and I'm just going to stop this here, and do know that your terminal can look different. If you want to get back to Bash or Python, you can do that. The very common way people have done debugging, because they just didn't want to run the debugging tools, was they would just print. You'd like print a variable to see what that variable is. And that's a perfectly fine way of doing it. But what you want to do here is up your game and learn how to use the debugger tools. It's vitally important, because it not only makes your code more understandable to you, it actually is a way to study your own code, to be able to talk about it, right? So here I'm running a function, I'm not passing anything into it, but running through this debugging will make you better, honestly. And by the way, what I say here is, I want you to run through your Dev 0 using this tool, right? And then after you do this step, then write about anything you learned from doing this debugger steps. And if you've already been using debugger, talk about your view of the importance. And I should have said, maybe some people feel like it isn't. I'd be interested to hear about that case, but it isn't. So, all right. So that's 40 points, and it's a minimum of 100 words. So the other thing is, now that we've been through this great, and I said this in the code along for week 10, I really think this regular expressions, regex is the way we talk about it when you talk to people who do this more often. It was a really good, I don't know if I'd call it a deep dive, but it was a pretty good dive. And I really like that last phone email scraper. So I want you to think about, right? So I'm going to have in Dev 1, right, at least, and I almost want to make this more, but at least one of you have to use a regular expression at least one time. But what I want you to do here for this work is, I want you to think up 3 ways you would use them in your Dev 1. And, and then so think of them and write as much detail as you can about what you would want how would you use that regular expression. As an example, one of the ways I've been thinking about is why not use it and change my program to where when the user responds like 0 for playing rock, scissors, paper, 0, 1, or 2, actually have them input it. But in that case, use a regular expression to to figure out or validate their input, right? We've been using various techniques of ORs, or also we've been doing try except, which is fine too. But there also is a way I could see using regular expressions for validation. So that's the way I'm going to look at this. But I want you to think of 3 different ways you would use in your Dev 1 code. Now, it's not that you have to commit to doing this all 3 ways. You'll probably end up with maybe 1 or 2 or maybe more. Okay. So, and then in your reply, write about these, what the 3 things you think you're kind of giving some conceptual ideas, and then attempt to code that regular expression, right? So, and because I'm asking you for 3, I want you to attempt to code that 3, right? But at minimum, I need to see 2 here, right? So I want you to at least take the skills that you've learned in this discussion, because I had said this in the code-along, learning how to write regular expressions is like learning a new programming language. But it is a programming language that, once you understand, can be used in pretty much any programming language, because all modern programming languages support regular expressions. Okay? So, but I know as he's going through that code, it must seem like, holy mac, are we even talking about Python anymore? And the answer is not really in this section, but it is common and a very powerful thing to know how to write regular expressions. So in your reply, just to come back to this, write about the 3 ways you would use them. And that's what the reply could be. And by the way, you could put this writing in a file, but I want you to then, would do in your code, and then write out the regular expressions. Again, I'm not going to put this into writing, but minimum of 2, you have to at least write those out. And I would almost say, I'd be willing to say maybe like what we did in week 8, like a easier one and then a harder one. Like, come up with how you think you could integrate this, because now this is the perfect time now that you've been through that content. All right, so make sure you do 2 substantive replies to your fellow students. So I've broken down the points. I've shown you, at least up here, you have a minimum writing, and here you have some writing and a code example. Okay, I hope that helps extend your knowledge of a really important topic. Talk to you later.